today's video gets started, if you want to support me in the Fortnite item shop, make sure to go to support a creator, type in robotic and accept. Yes, this video is pretty long and there may or may not be a part 2. But I also want to give a shout out to Beta Gaming. I don't know if he'll comment on this video, but if he will, I will pin his comment and heart it so you guys go subscribe to him. Because he also has his perspective of this video, which is the exact same, but you still see his because he talks about something extra, I think. I don't know.
Yo, what's up, fam squad?
Yeah, just enjoy the video of me acting like I know stuff. What's going on, guys? SWAT Robotic here, and today we are going to be, me and Beta Gamer are going to be breaking down the entirety of the Fortnite storyline, as far as we know. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things we don't know about, so there will be some credit to other YouTubers down in the description, which no one looks at. But yeah, a lot of people just go by listing the events. That's not what we're doing here. We're breaking it down. The only person I've seen do it like this is thesmithplays. Shout out to him. If you're seeing this, dude, please make that part 2 very soon, because I need the content. Anyways, let's get into this. Okay, so in the beginning, there was a man named Dr. Vinderman. Now, this name may actually sound familiar, as VinderTech Labs, as some of the role players know. And the V in V-Bucks does stand for VinderTech. Shout out to thesmithplays for me knowing that. But yeah, eventually, what we do know about Dr. Vinderman is that he created the battle pass of almost every skin, or as he calls them, commanders, that we know were created by Vinderman. And some people even suspect he made the first ever Chapter 1 island. Okay, but we don't know that for sure, so I'm not going to confirm that. So of course, in the first 3, what he calls lifetimes, what we are going to call seasons of Fortnite Battle Royale, they were pretty peaceful, well, for an island of people that kill each other, until one day, a meteor,
including this little gingerbread man.
Yep, and a meteor showed up.
Alright, and beginning where he left off, little did the people of the island know there was an escape pod in that meteor. And once it hit it, the government was doing its best to crack open the meteor. And once they finally did,
well, we actually don't know what we're gonna call the government actually is. See, the meteor was raining down and it hit Dusty Depot, which would not come back until until later, which we'll get to. But of course, the meteor held extraterrestrial life, and the government, or what thesmithplays calls Organization X, wanted. Now, I theorize that Midas is actually Organization X, and we will get back to that later. Or the government. But for now, we are just going to call them the government. We know what they're after now, but at the time, we didn't know. All we knew is they wanted what is in the meteor. And what was in the meteor was the Visitor, the biggest hero in our island. But of course, at the time, we thought the Visitor was evil. But of course, when the meteor landed, the government, this has been confirmed, or at least that's what we pretty sure it's been confirmed. The government set up a movie site with a hero base and a villain base with a prop rocket. Doesn't make much sense. We know now that this was a charade, but we don't know this at the time. But it didn't make much sense at the time. They just got hit by a meteor, and now they're setting up a rocket base. Now they're setting up a movie? Not sure why. And yeah, we later figure out that when the Visitor escapes, the second the Visitor escaped, they started scooping up all the hot rocks and delivering them over to the rocket. Now, my theory, and we're not sure exactly, but I'm pretty sure it is the Visitor that is controlling this. The Visitor is an extraterrestrial. Sorry, no, the government is controlling this, but the Visitor was able to hack the rocket under the nose of the government and was able to launch it to try to get home. But something malfunctioned. In a change of heart, the Visitor decided to attacked Tilted. No, that's not actually what happened. That is a myth. What really happened there was the government was able to take back control of the rocket for a brief period and went down to destroy Tilted. We never actually know why Tilted was the big concern, as we know that the 0 point, which is what they wanted, was under Loot Lake. But they went for Tilted, but the visitor using the rifts, which are things we'll get back to very soon, was able to use the power of the rifts to get the rocket away and save us all. But how long did that savior really last?
Alright, so now I get to talk about Season 5. So, first, as we all know, the rocket, we thought the visitor was trying to destroy us, but in reality, they were just trying to help. And they were just trying to get back home. And now, after we know this, we should probably move on to Season 5 now. And so, let's start where it began. In the first bit, we see that Drift is just minding his own business, finding something in the middle of the desert somehow. I don't know how he does this, but I mean, maybe he just likes using graffiti on the ground or something. I don't know. So, and then we later find out that a bunch of other stuff from Earth, or wherever Drift came from, which we assume is Earth, because we actually found the Durburger in the middle of the Californian desert. And there are also multiple llamas and phone booths in Paris. And now we know why. The rifts carried all of the stuff from the Fortnite island to the real world, and they also carried stuff from the real world to the Fortnite island.
Alright, this is where I'm gonna quickly come in. This was a very big hint at the future duality. Anyway, so yeah, but what the big thing that Aiden's about to talk about here is the crack in the sky. Obviously, it brought us the lovable Kevin, but we're not over Kevin right now. We're gonna talk about the implication he brought to the storyline. Aiden, from the top, go.
Alright. So, we all know that, and I didn't talk about it much before I said everything else, but the visitor created the crack in the sky. I don't believe he did this on purpose, though. But due to the rift being in the sky, or the crack, or whatever you'd like to call it, made it so that just things would keep on happening, and it's like an endless cycle.
It almost felt like the crack was trying to do something, but because of someone being somewhere, it couldn't do it. So then it brought the last thing it could think of before closing, the cube Kevin. Kevin began to roll around the island and leaving a few gravity imprints, which actually were the biggest things, but were actually incredibly important. But at the time we didn't know. Then it headed over to Loot Lake to create Bouncy Lake, or Thanos Lake, or whatever the hell you called it. It was incredibly important, but I'm gonna quickly touch on what Aiden said. Again, the real world thing was actually intentional. This wasn't a marketing strategy. I mean, it probably was, but like, there's actually story locations because it was hinting at 2 dimensions. Drift came from the real world, but so did the ATKs and the Durburger. But the llamas came from our world to the real world. Or like Earth, real world. Like, not, you know what I mean. Alright, but now let's talk about Season 6. One of the biggest seasons.
I'd like to... Alright, it's time to talk about Season 6, and just for this, I'm gonna put on Calamity, because I don't know what else to do with it. So, just talking about the stuff that happened in the middle of the season, well, just to start off. So, it essentially just picks up right when we left off in Season 5, where Kevin, or just the cube, whatever you want to call it Kevin because it's Kevin, he eventually, well, after he falls into Loot Lake, or swims in the Loot Lake, or whatever, he goes down underneath the island in the middle, and he eventually brings it up into the sky, and now it is a floating island with Kevin underneath it, holding it up. The island moves around the island, flying around and picking up the runes and making them into tiny floating islands.
Now, while doing this, we didn't know what he was trying to do, even though we had a theory. The theory was that he was trying to gain power, and this was actually incorrect. While he was gaining power from them, that was not the point of this. The point of it was to try to discover what was underneath the island, because our theory is that someone from the crack in the sky sent the cube here to absorb the 0 point, and it was trying to use the runes as a way to power up to see what was underneath the island. But that did not work, so it headed back to the lake, and Aiden, it did what?
It did the unthinkable. It freaking exploded in all our faces, and then there was a rainbow. Yay. But
now, hold
in
on.
the middle of all that...
No, never mind, he's got it.
In the middle of all this, we were sent to a whole new dimension no one has ever seen before.
Is known as
and it
an
would be eventually used. And it was eventually used in something later on in Chapter 1. But we'll get into that later.
This was the in-between, and this was our first look at what this is where Kevin came from. But luckily, someone saved us. In the time, this person was represented by the single thing of a butterfly. And, Loot Lake changed dramatically. The Kevin shards were dug into the ground, and now it almost looked as if whoever was there got close. But the butterfly thing saved it. Now on to Season 7.
About Season 7. Pass it on to him.
So yeah, after the cube exploded and the butterfly saved our island, things went relatively back to normal. But then the AIM bot came in. That's what Swamp Reaper calls him. No, but the AIM skin came into our island and looked to be scouting out something. We don't know what it was. Well, we know now, but we didn't know what it was at the time. But then we also saw a snowstorm moving in, and then came the start of Season 7. The snowstorm crashed into the island, getting rid of SHAREfactory, the D area, and bringing on a whole new series of snow people. But the two people I want to focus on are the Ice King and the Prisoner. What the AIM skin was looking out for was the 0 point, as we know now that the Ice King and the Prisoner were after it. Ice King wanted it to expand his snowstorm, and the Prisoner wanted it to destroy the Ice King. However, Ice King was smart and froze the Prisoner solid, but we didn't know this for a while. When the Ice King first came in, it was very clear that he was the ruler of the ice. I mean, it was very subtly told by his name, the Ice King. No, but the Ice King had a goal. He needed to move the snow fully as his ice capsule was melting, and the loading screen that he was in said this. What? The ice was never supposed to thaw. I was not supposed to be awoken. Clearly, something went wrong. The prisoner, or the person locked underneath, was melting the ice, and dragon eggs were shown. Now, obviously, this was not good for the Ice King, and he had to act quick. So he took fragments of the cube, which were covering something, and used it to He used it to freeze over the entire island, giving us control of it. Who could save us this time? That butterfly? No, not this time. Ice King had full control of the island. However, the prisoner was stronger than him. The prisoner was able to melt through the capsule, and though still locked, chains began to melt the island. Eventually, Ice King knew he had to do something, but he couldn't. The Ice King was overpowered. The prisoner, finally back into his strongest form, erupted the volcano. So yeah, now Season 8 comes. The prisoners in full control of the island, with the top right side of the map completely covered over in jungle tropical things. There was a banana skin from the time. The prisoner had taken control of his side of the island, and the Ice King knew he couldn't do anything. Knowing this, a new thing came onto the island. The pirates. Now, the pirate literally doesn't do anything, so we're just gonna say he got eaten by the prisoner, okay? Because he doesn't do anything. But what is really important is that over by in a few different areas of the island, there was something called dig sites. The government came back, this time knowing they could get to Loot Lake. After being gone for so long, the government came back and started to dig up sites, needing to test their ability. They first dug up one by a pirate base camp, and out came what we know as excavation sites, and a geyser came with it. Next, they dug up dusty divots, obviously getting closer to Loot Lake. And then something wrong happened. It burst into lava. Now, obviously, this confused the government, but they also knew that this was the good thing, as they knew that Loot Lake was close, and that if it wasn't water, that meant that Loot Lake's thing that they were after was close. Going to Loot Lake, they dug it up, and out came the vault. Now, obviously, this is exactly what the government wanted. They started moving different rune symbols into the thing. Finally, the last rune came and opened up the vault. But as this was happening, the prisoner was starting to erupt his volcano. Or was he doing it? No, in fact, he was not. The volcano itself was unstable with all the air pressure. With more geysers in the vault and all the digging, the volcano was becoming unstable and had to blow its load. I had to say it. Anyways, but this was not good for the butterfly thing. What was going to happen? The butterfly was not there. She was somewhere else. She was not on this island. She was doing what? We find out next season. But before we go to there, we need to talk about the unvaulting event. The government has finally found the 0 point sphere. They have it in their control. They opened the vault, and there it is again, the in-between. We see the 0 point sphere at the time, but at the time we didn't know what that was. We see a mask, a very strange mask. And we see 6 vaulted items, so there's nothing new with the storyline. But it did bring the drum gun back, which was, of course, epic. Anyways, but then we get shot out of the vault. But as soon as we went in there, we were sent out. We go back up into the main island where the volcano has finally hit its peak unstable. We see with the 0 point being shown to air. Volcano erupts, destroying half of retail, destroying all of Tilted except for one building, which we will talk about right after this, and hitting Polar Peak. But not just anywhere where he was, but this time an eye formed. But we'll talk about that later. Now let's go back to that Tilted building. This building is called No Sweat Insurance, and we will talk a lot more about them in this and when we get to this season. But No Sweat Insurance pretty much protects things from natural disasters, and that's why it cannot be broken. However, it didn't do much in Chapter 1, so we're not going to talk about it. Alright, but obviously now, the Guardian of the Vault knew she had to act fast.
Alright, so in the beginning of Season 9, there wasn't much story stuff, but after you get past the beginning part, there's a lot of story. And it's second highest to Season X in all this. And first, we discovered that retail and Tilted have become whole new places. They've been upgraded.
Almost as if to make us... Obviously, we knew this was the work of someone, as she left herself as a statue in Neo Tilted. It was almost like this person was giving us just enough to feel comfortable and stop asking questions. this person we'd come to find out is Singularity. Alright, that's all I have to say for right now. You may continue talking.
Alright. And this right here is who we would know as Singularity. And she was the one who helped rebuild Tilted and Retail. She knew that she had to do something, and since she couldn't help before, she knew she had to do something now. And she brought life back to the entire island and brought hope. But we'd soon come to know that the government has just left most of everything. The government decided to stop working, and they just essentially just left. No one knows where they went exactly, and they wouldn't return until much later.
We figure out why this happens in this season, but of course we're not on that yet.
We soon discover that the footprint that was left behind in much earlier in just the Fortnite island of Chapter 1.
7.
We learned that the footprint actually led up to something much bigger, even much bigger than the footprint itself. And we learned that the meteor, or whatever, this thing from the volcano that hit Polar Peach cracked open the ice that was holding in a powerful monster had escaped.
Carrying Polar Peak on its back, which was kind of funny, but
yeah, which was surprising.
This was troubling to Singularity. She knew that this monster obviously was not running wild, and someone, mainly the prisoner, had control over it. See, when hitting the Polar Peak Island, they cracked open the monster, but also took control of it. So the prisoner now wanted what was underneath the lake, and Singularity had to act fast. So over at the volcano, they turned it into an area and they started constructing robots. This robot was Singularity's last hope without showing her face. She didn't want to be seen, but eventually she knew she had to be. While finishing the robot, she showed herself, and she knew she was done. The monster then came out of the water, and Aiden will explain the rest.
The monster destroyed one pirate camp and just left nothing but a couple of floors and a wall. Then the monster ran or walked over to Loot Lake, and at that point, most people of Chapter 1 just lost hope. But then, just in time, Singularity powered up the robot from the inside and managed to overpower the monster with a bunch of rockets that were surprisingly small for being rockets.
It was surprisingly easy, a little too easy if you think about it. But Singularity, confident she had saved the world, confidently struck with her robots, and then disaster strikes. The monster hops back on her, behind her, the robot, and then in a last-ditch effort, the monster doesn't rip off her arm. She rips off her own arm and flings it back to give her the little bit amount of time. She knew whose secret was out. She had to act fast. Singularity was not a savior to our island. She was just trying to protect the point from the government. But she knew she didn't have a choice. Singularity couldn't protect it for any longer. So using the robot, she grabs down into the vault and grabs the 0 point to charge up a punch to knock the robot out. Then she gives us her last trick. Singularity goes to Tilted Towers in what looks like a statue and pulls it out of the ground to reveal a sword, killing the monster and then going to the place where she was at the beginning. Another world.
The 0 point.
No, that's not where that's where we thought she was, but that's not true. She was in this island. See, she was already constructing a new island in case something bad happened with the 0 point. But however, what she thought would happen wasn't what happened. What she would assume would happen is the island would entirely blow up and everyone on the would die and she was going to be safe. But someone we knew came back. The visitor. So yes, the visitor came back. How though? Well, when the 0 point cracked, it led Jonesy, well not really, but it led us to the in-between with the merging of the two timelines. And obviously, the visitor knew what he had to do. The visitor has been our savior for the longest time, and this time he knew the entire world was at stake. The visitor, because Singularity couldn't do it, he had to step in and contain the 0 point. He was never the bad guy here. He was the good guy. Alright, here we go. So, what the visitor did is, as we know, there are 7 scientists, and the visitor needed a way to contact them. But here's the thing. He shouldn't have been able to do any of this. The meteor should have hit the ground. But because his visitor was stuck in the in-between with the rocket, the pinching of the time and space made it stop entirely. Was stopped, and the only way to get it out was for energy to burst through it. But the visitor didn't want to do that yet. He needed to get the other 7 He needed to get the other 7 alternate timeline. Yeah, what's up?
So, I do want to say though, later during season 10, which I'm not trying to spoil, he says that the only way to stop the 0 point from being destroyed, or the only way to destroy it, is to destroy it from the inside of all of it.
He knows that at the 0, throughout the season the 0 point will crack, and he knows that if it fully destroys, we will die. But anyways, we're not there yet. That will be something that I think maybe I'll talk about, or Aiden will. But anyways, he needs a way to contact the 7 scientists, and the way he does this is by opening up rip beacons. See, each scientist comes from a different timeline, and the first place he goes is to Neo-Tilted. Obviously, this alternate timeline visitor, comes from a very, very old time. See, each rift zone had its own timeline to contact itself. Obviously, the visitor left 2 of them as when he was back in the game for a reason that I think Aiden or maybe me will talk about. But Aiden, I'm going to let Aiden talk for a bit, so yeah, enjoy him.
The second thing that happens is, was it Mega Mall?
Yeah.
I feel like that was Mega Mall.
It was Mega Mall, because it went Tilted Town and then Mega Mall.
Yeah. So, we know that Tilted, the brand new Tilted became Old Tilted, and one of the 7 that we don't actually know their name of or who they are is from an old time, as my friend Jordan here said. But what about the one when Mega Mall was turned back into the original Retail Row, but there were zombies? Was this because it was basically a Wild West visitor? Maybe.
I'm going to say, my theory is that this was for Visitor. I think this was Visitor's place because he was in the in-between when this thing happened. And so he wanted the zombies to be there as a defense mechanism from the inhabitants of the island, bringing it back to Mega Mall. See, each place has a very weird technique as a defense mechanism. And obviously I'll let Aiden talk more, but I just wanted to point that out.
As we know, Tilted had no build and no break-in. And I believe this is why it goes along with what Jordy here said with the defense mechanisms. But before we get into all the other ones, I do have a question for you, Jordy. What about the soccer field?
See, this is a perfect point, thank you for asking. As it is should, the visitor's plan for the soccer field didn't work. his plan was to let the scientists start its work there. The visitor wanted the scientists to work at the soccer field because that was clearly his plan, but something malfunctioned. It's almost as if there was a virus there. It malfunctioned. It blew up and gave us corruptions. So something went wrong, and we would find out what that was later.
What was the third one?
The third one was there was the Greasy Grove and Moisty Palms, which again have defense mechanisms.
First, I want to get into Greasy Grove. So, we thought Greasy Grove would come back because, as we saw sometime in one of the seasons before, there's the bright future, which showed. Let me see if I can find it.
The reason we aren't going to talk about, so while he does that, the reason we're not going to talk about the Pandora one is because the Pandora one has no effect on the storyline. So
as you can see on the loading screen that I'm showing here, we have Bright Bomber pointing her pickaxe while at the Greasy Grove playground.
So we assumed that it was going to come back as normal, but of course the visitor knew better. He knew that the inhabitants were going to be confused and would break it, so he brought in a defense mechanism. Aiden, the defense mechanism was...
The defense mechanism was something really dumb, but also really funny at the same time. I don't know why, but it just is. Every couple of minutes or seconds or whatever,
45 seconds,
you get tacos on your hands, and you'd basically do nana, except you can move around while doing it. And it kept you from using anything else. It was essentially a boogie bomb, but it did it automatically.
Of course, Moisty Palms was different. See, one of the big things is that since everyone kills each other, you have to crouch to do things. You have to crouch up and down. Well, the visitor being smart made it you're a prop when you do that. And when you're a prop, you can't hold anything. So being a prop meant you couldn't destroy his island. And obviously, of course, the props were funny, but we need to talk about one last thing. I know there's a lot of other, places, but the one that I really want to focus on is Story Suburbs. And you're up.
You don't want to talk about?
You know, I'll take it from here. Story Suburbs is so like I said, each island has a defense mechanism, but the visitor decided that since Paradigm came from a world where everyone was super overpowered, Story Suburbs' defense mechanism was to drop stars that give you really good weapons. But this works. Everyone was so busy on opening the stars that no one was breaking it down, and that meant that the Paradigm was able to get her rocket ready. But very, very strangely, at Dusty Depot, the rocket was being built. The visitor had to go back into his area, Retail Row. And so because of this, the scientist takes over. Yes, and how does this happen? Well, the scientist is actually the visitor in mech armor. See, he was scanning the mech pieces and found a corruption, meaning that the scientist was a corrupted version of the visitor. But see, the scientist still had his brain working, giving us the tapes he left. He left for himself, which is why he constantly stutters over his words, referring to himself as I, or you, or me, or us, because he doesn't know. He is corrupted, but still knows enough, which is obviously why the theorem, so this is actually says the theorem was a success. It's
unintelligible.
Yeah, and see, my theory is that this is the Pythagorean theorem. Listen closely. The theorem was a success. Now play that, but say Pythagorean. The Pythagorean theorem was a success. It matches perfectly.
So what is this theorem?
But we don't know for sure what the theorem is. But anyways, so the scientist, knowing knowing at least part of his goal was to build a rocket, builds the final rocket. But knowing that, see, he left the tapes for himself, not for the inhabitants, but because when you go, he knew that he couldn't launch the rocket while stuck in the loop, while working outside of the loop. He had to go push himself back into the loop and launch the rocket. But in doing so, he would lose his memory, thus giving us the tapes. See, he made this at precisely the time. He's told himself to hit the beacon at precisely the time, which is nothing. And this is because this is the moment that he would push himself. That was the moment when he would finally get through the loop. See, when the countdown started, that is when he started pushing himself back into the loop. But he couldn't fully he was only able to hear the tapes. He wasn't fully able to get through the loop. So he had to wait until the timer reaches nothing to synchronize the junction. Now, obviously, he left the tapes, and there's a few things in here. One, the one that's most important to me is the 0 point must be contained once more. They are the good guys. Since Singularity couldn't do it for whatever reason, they came in to save the 0 point. And then they launched the rocket. See, the other of them were working. There's a reason why all the rifts in the sky closed at the exact same time. That's because they were portals to the other dimensions. In doing so, 6 different rockets came out. The visitors, paradigms, the scientists, and 4 others. See, so at first they just kind of spin around and no one knows why. Well, I did. See, I said that the moment it happened, the scientists, see, now that the visitor or the scientist had pushed himself back into the loop, he knew what he needed to do. He needed to get control of 1, the rifts, and 2, the rockets. That's why they'll go through random rifts just to test if the rifts are working properly. And when they finally got it, they all go through to this certain rift. They then do a cycle where they go through from the top of the meteor, from the beginning of the gas to the meteor, and they do that till so much matter builds up that the meteor breaks the loop. But obviously, it rips it away. And then the scientist's rocket aims right down on the 0 point to hit it, so to keep it in place, launching us all back. Then the other 6 rockets guide the meteor down on the 0 point. They hit it. Now, obviously, you're thinking this would be dumb, but no. The 0 point was becoming unstable, cracking throughout the season. If they didn't blow it up now, we were going to die. This way they would secure it inside of the meteor. That meteor, though, never be seen again. We are sucked into the black hole, and then there was almost nothing. Because somehow the visitor survives, and with minutes he gives us a code. I was not alone. This was not calculated. There were others outside the loop. Now, who are these others? The nothing is now inevitable. Now, who are these others? We don't know, do we? Actually, we do. The others are Midas and the Chaos Agent. The leaders of the creators and leaders of the Ego and Alter groups. Midas and Chaos Agent are the 2 people that were outside of the loop the entire time. See, the government isn't Midas. I only said it was because in a way Midas works with it. The Ego is the government. That's why I said he is, but those helicopters weren't his. They were the work of the Chaos Agent, trying to get the 0 point before the good guys did. But obviously, and it's been confirmed that the scientists, or the 7, had contact with Ego. But they didn't know that they were outside the loop. All they knew is that they existed. But because of this, the black hole lasted way longer than they expected. They expected to be a brief momentary pause before we went back onto the island. But instead, we were stuck there. Because of Midas and the Chaos Agent being outside of the loop, they were stuck. They knew they needed to do something. In a last-ditch effort, they sent us out of the black hole. They kept us in the black hole until someone discovered it. Until we learned that Midas sent Ego onto the new island. And then, Chapter 2, Season 1 began. So, during the beginning of Chapter 2, there wasn't much we knew. All we knew is that this was a new island, and we didn't seem to be leaving anytime soon. Obviously, this meant a new storyline. And the first part of this new storyline was that the 7 aren't dead. In fact, none of them are. They're still here and alive, good and well. Obviously, they don't do much this season, in Season 1, so we're not going to talk much about them. What we do need to talk about is Ego and Alter. 2 seemingly similar groups, but at the same time, they're the exact opposite. Why I say that is the theme, like the overall theme is duality, while in the first chapter, it was 0 points. It seems to all be related to duality, as both these things have been one group versus another. Ghost versus Shadow, but this season it was Alter versus Ego. And of course, that is really funny. Not really, but of course, here's what I really want to talk about. Ego seem to be the good guys, the military group, but obviously their leader, well, he's a good guy. He is a good guy, we think. Anyways, we don't talk much about him this season. What we do talk about is the Chaos Agent, the most important player in the first season. He's the leader of the Alters, which is, of course, my going theory that he was outside the loop the visitor was as well, watching from the shadows. Him and Midas were there, but they weren't together. Obviously, the Chaos Agent has a role to play. But, yeah, his crowning moment was to create the Kevolution of Ripley. And he created the Slurp people. He was just there to create whatever he could on the island he was on. And of course, doing that, he created alter egos. Get it? Alter egos of the good guys. The egos. Midas created Riptide, 8-Ball, Journey, Ripley, Fusion isn't either, actually he's his own character, but Midas, let me start from the beginning. Midas created Ripley, Journey, Riptide, Turk, yeah, Riptide, Ripley, Journey, 8-Ball, and Cameo, but Chaos Agent, using the duality clone, created evil versions, including, but not limited to, actually including, Riptide, Hazard, Scratch. There was a glitched version, we don't know much about him, but including Sludge, Scratch, Chick, Hazard, Toxin, and Riptide. And other than that, we don't know much, but all we know is the Chaos Agent wants the power of something. And my theory is another vault. But actually, no, that's not my theory. That's Aiden's theory. He thinks it's another vault, right?
Yes, I do.
My personal theory is that he wanted the power of the Doomsday device. He was the one that wanted to control it, and he was using part of its Doomsday power to create the Slurp Legends pack. Obviously creating the Ego and Ripley. That was his, goal pretty much. However, this is where the story ends. We never really got an answer to, what did the Chaos Agent want, because there was no live event. All we knew was that something was happening and that something was not good. But like I said, that's where this story ends. Because we don't know enough to say anything else other than that's about it. But then Chapter 2 Season 2 came along, and that helped a lot. Yeah, Chapter 2 Season 2 came along and introduced the teams of Ghost and Shadow. And along came Midas, the leader of the Egos. Now, Ego, introduced as a good guy, their leader is presumably a bad guy at first. Like, he's done a lot of things like kill off people. But the trailer that we have actually lets us understand what did Midas actually want. And he seems to just want the control of something. But he also wants to protect us from something, I think. I think that what he's trying to protect us from is the potential recurrence of a storm catastrophe. He's trying to tamper with the storm so that way the storm is broken because of him, not because of a natural disaster. Now, while the no sweat insurance building has played a huge they can't protect every island, thus by a lot of the islands not having any. But obviously, Midas wants something, and this cinematic proves it. As you can tell, he's holding some sort of agency, which is why it's called that. And of course, to do that, he needs the people that are his agents. Obviously, Hazard Journey seemed to be a good guy, but she reports to him, as do many of the other characters. What does he want? I don't know. But he's building a doomsday machine, and that's not good. Obviously, he's the leader of Ghost by the fact leader of Ghost and Shadow, and his house was that little island, as they called it. Of course, what he's doing is unknown, and that's why I'm not going to say his plan, because I don't know it. But what I do know is that he's hiding it. He's protecting the inhabitants from something. He's protecting everyone from the knowledge he has, which is why he kills off characters such as these ones. So obviously he killed off the Black Knight because the Black Knight knew too much. Remember, he was the guy at Weeping Woods. If you remember, Weeping Woods was overtaken by the volcano, which of course the Midas knew about, so he killed him off. He killed off the aimbot because he was the scanner. He killed off School 8-Ball because he knew too much. And the big one on that list, well, there's two big ones. Number one is the Mask of the Chaos Agent. Did Midas kill him off? No, he didn't. He almost did. Remember, the Chaos Agent has style with his mask off, so Midas was able to kill him, was able to take him down, but wasn't able to kill him. But the big mask on there is the mask of Lynx. Lynx was the one that Meowscles is, of course, in love with. Referenced very subtly by the big giant tramp stamp on his arm. And obviously, Meowscles went Shadow. Is it because he got kicked off his yacht? No. No, it's not. He got kicked off the yacht, duh, but that's not why he's sad. Otherwise, he would have stayed Ghost. I mean, crying maybe, but he would have stayed Ghost. He went Shadow because Meowscles is pissed at Midas for killing off Lynx. So, Meowscles might have a role in trying to stop Midas from activating his Doomsday device. But he isn't going to stop him. No way in hell. Obviously, we don't know enough yet, and I will make a little mini part 2 to this after the event happens where we know more. But that's about all I know for now. Please let me know what you think. I know this was a very long video, but I'm gonna keep it this way. I don't want too much. I don't want this cut out. It's supposed to be long. And Smith Plays was over an hour. This one's not even close to that probably. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Aiden, give me your last thoughts, and then we'll end the video.
Yeet, 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 yeet.
Couldn't have said anything better myself.